Kia ora, welcome. This is the Iti Nei Te Marama exhibit or living handbook at PIAM. So thank you for coming to visit and sharing this space with us. We want to thank our ancestors and the ancestors of this place and this land and the people that are still living here today for receiving us and welcoming us to be their guests in this land. My name is Melody Turori, and I am I'm an artist. I am an artist here in Southern California, and I have helped to curate some of the pieces in the story of this space right now at PIAM. And the origins of this project started in a presentation that I gave at the beginning of the year and some research that I've done as a scholar. And I think the best way to start thinking about this is to remember, maybe you've seen the animated film Alice in Wonderland, the Disney version from decades ago. One of the most kind of enduring refrains from that movie is the character of the White Rabbit and his little kind of song, singing like, I'm late, I'm late, I'm late for a very important date. And we remember that, and it goes throughout the film, but the thing that we kind of overlook is why he's late. Like, what is he late for? He's late for work. So from our very earliest formative years as children, there's this narrative of time being important, time being scarce, and this idea that we should spend our time working. So this Western economic system and time system, it treats time as a commodity and a scarce one. So we say things like, time is money, and then we think about saving time, or how we spend it, like we could spend time wisely or foolishly. We try and do all of these things to buy ourselves more time. All the while we know that this is actually not true, right? This is a false thing. Like, you can't actually buy more time. But in these narratives, a lot of the time, we think that the best way to spend time is by working, like working harder, working smarter so that you can get more out of your time. And usually this means working longer hours. This is where we get hustle culture from and grind culture from. I'm a product of this myself. I am I don't like the word workaholic, but I work a lot, and I have always worked a lot. My parents worked a lot. My grandparents worked a lot. But one of the things that I remember about my dad, who is Pacifica, he's from the Cook Islands, even though he worked very hard during the week, come Sunday afternoon, after church, he would always be in the same place, and that would be taking a nap. Always. Even to this day, like sometimes, we'll be gathering the family together for something, and like, oh, where's Dad? How come Dad's not here? And then somebody will go, oh, it's Sunday afternoon, and everyone goes, oh yes, Dad's taking a nap. He'll be here later. So there's this real conflict between these systems of time that we live under and the system of time that our ancestors lived under and where we come from. So I think it's important to go back and look at how do we think about time and how do we think about work and rest and how all of these things played together. A lot of indigenous time systems are rooted in land. So they're land-based, which means they work very differently from a Western system of time. A Western system of time is very structured, it's fixed, it's linear, we measure it in tiny units like minutes and seconds and hours and days. So it can be broken down, and that's partly why we treat it like a commodity, because it's something that you can break into pieces. And I think this is also why we feel that pressure of time, because in linear time, once you pass a point, you can't go back and receive it. You can't go back and learn from it, really. It's something that's in your past forever. But that's not how indigenous peoples and indigenous peoples of the Pacific have conceived of time. And really, to force indigenous people into this structure of time that really benefits an industrial economy is one of the ways that colonization worked, was to take away how our people, how our ancestors thought about time and how time moves and what time is for. So I've been studying the Marama, which is the lunar calendar of the Aotearoa Maori. I'm Cook Islands Maori myself. However, I don't have any family knowledge, and there's not very much scholarly knowledge about the lunar calendar from the Cook Islands. We did have one. So I've looked to our relatives across the Moana in Aotearoa to see what their system of time was like, and it's so different from our time system here. It's what they call, the fancy scholarly term is polychronic, which means that time is much more fluid and dynamic. It changes. It changes based on the ecology, so your specific location. So there's no one single Maramataka, there's no single Maori system of time. It's really rooted in the specific place that you are. So an iwi that lives across the island from you, or even maybe 30 minutes down the road, could have a notably different calendar because their location is different. So their system of time is not just the Maramataka, which is the lunar calendar and the lunar phases. It also factors in the constellations, factors in the sun, the migration of birds, what the pattern of the tides are during different parts of the year. And so our ancestors, our Maori ancestors of Aotearoa, were these incredibly detailed, observant scientists who were constantly observing the world around them so that they would know how time passes, and then how to work, like when was a good time to work, when was a good time to plant kumara. And you would get different types of crop yield depending on the lunar phase that you planted in. And then they would also use this calendar to know when was a good time to rest, when was a good time to be in community, to have ceremonies, to celebrate. Everything, every part of life was interwoven and interconnected together within this system of time. So I think that we can think of our present time that we live in as being very rigid, whereas this Maori time was relational time. Everything was in relation to each other. And so their rhythms of work and their rhythms of rest were also in relation to what was going on in the world around them. And so it's cyclical, right? It's circular, it's not linear, which means there's opportunity to try again. I think a lot of times in our work lives, we have these deadlines, they progress in a very linear fashion, and if you don't meet a deadline, or even if you do, there's all this stress and kind of panic around these deadlines because you're reaching for a fixed point in time. Whereas if we could find a way to think differently, to think more land-based time, then maybe we would find new ways of setting deadlines that might be more cyclical, right? And reliant on this idea that, you know, if you don't quite get the exact result you wanted or needed this time, it's okay, because you're going to circle back and try again, and then maybe next time it would be different. So that's kind of the ethos and the thought process around what's in the space right now. There are many of our ancestor pieces here. Each of them has a story to tell, and we are really being led by Marama, our elder, the moon. So the moon is something that reveals the world in a unique way. I don't know how much time you have had or opportunity you've had to spend outside on a moonlit night, but the way the moon falls and the different kinds of shadows and light that come in, it's the same world that we walk around in during the day, but it looks very different and it feels very different, and it's because of the light and the light source. So when we think about that, that's the same world from a new perspective. So allowing the moon and the moonlight to help us see what we see every day, but maybe in a little bit different way. So many of the ancestors that are in the space, they have their traditional knowledge story. They have a little bit of a story from our perspective as younger generations, as their descendants, thinking about the lessons that they have taught us and the questions that they bring up. So there's a lot of questioning here, and I hope that you will be curious and try to see things, like when you look at something and it's unexpected, to be curious about why and what you could learn from whatever is different and new. So enjoy the space.